How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit temptationstreats.com to learn more.
Welcome to the Farm Here Daily Podcast. I'm David Geiger, your host. I've been on Iowa TV and radios for over a decade, and I'm very excited to be starting up this podcast with the folks from Iowa Everywhere, as well as Group C. Today we'll be talking about Iowa weather and the latest crop progress report. Please be sure to like and follow this podcast, as well as our social media at Field Forward. It is thanks to listeners like you that we are able to make this local Iowa content, and we would love to have you as part of our community. All right, we are talking to Meaghan Anderson, ISU Extension Agronomist, here with us. Meaghan, it's been a while since I've chatted, and this is the first time we're going to be talking here on Farm Here Daily. Would love to just hear about what's going on with you and what's been going on out in the fields here in central Iowa.
Yeah, well, it's been awfully busy. Really kind of starting right ahead or just at that crop insurance planting day, April 10th or so, is really when the weather started to turn. We got a lot of crop in the ground early this year. I talked to several people that were finished planting before, April 17th, 18th, right around, Easter. They were finished with their planting, or at least one crop or the other. So we got a lot of stuff in early, got rained out for a little while, had some cooler temperatures in there that made us a little bit nervous, but now the weather has turned and things look awesome to be able to get the rest of our planting finished here in an incredibly timely manner, and to get it into really good soil conditions and at that, really optimal yield level potential, still sort of ahead of that May 15th date that we always kind of eye. So it's been a really good planting season so far, in my view.
We did have that crop progress report come out yesterday showing some pretty solid numbers in terms of soil moisture levels. You're saying that that's been supportive in farmer planting this past week or so?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely got rained out for a little while. Things were a little excessively wet for planting, which is what we expect for the spring. And honestly, we really needed some moisture coming into this growing season to help support us, especially with this sort of weather pattern it seems like we've been in for a while, where we get wet and then we get dry and we get wet and dry. And so having that soil moisture there for those dry periods will be really good. And conditions are really beautiful now. So it's not like it's been an extended problematic rainy period that's probably going to cause us much issue in the long run. It's just been something kind of expected from the spring.
Now, when you talk about getting rained out a little bit, I think of a little bit wetter weather when it comes to some of the seeds in the ground. I think disease as well. Is that something you guys are testing soil-wise for these fields here in central Iowa?
We'll certainly be monitoring for it. I don't know that our conditions were problematic enough and that they were like prolonged enough or wet enough to cause too much issue, but it wouldn't really surprise me if in some of these kind of prairie pothole areas and fields, we do see some things that either drowned out and just died due to lack of oxygen, or they perhaps got overtaken by disease. I really don't think it'll be a big problem, widespread or anything like that, but we might see a little bit of it, and we'll certainly be keeping an eye out. I've been watching a lot of these stands, some of that early April planted stuff as it's starting to emerge, and so far most of it looks really well. Probably the biggest issue that I have seen or heard from farmers is that we have seen some crusting issues, which is expected after some of these areas got, several inches of rainfall in a relatively short period of time. And with the tillage we do in some parts of the state, it doesn't really surprise me all that much that we had a little bit of crusting issue. And that rain sort of toward the end of last week early part of May. That did, I think, help alleviate some of those issues. So hopefully we won't see too much of a problem with emergence in those fields.
We're speaking with Meaghan Anderson, Iowa State University Extension agronomist here in Central Iowa, here on Farm Here Daily podcast. Right now, I wanted to go into some of the crusting issues you just mentioned, because the other aspect of having some of the rainy weeks that we had this past week is some compaction problems that you might have. How has that relationship been from seeing that crust to seeing some potential for being able to compact that soil down?
Yeah, I think the little bit of rainfall that we had last week helped alleviate some of those crusting issues that we were seeing. Hopefully we see some good evenness of emergence, but I do think in some of those fields we're likely to see some uneven emergence, perhaps some stand loss that maybe we wouldn't have seen if we didn't have those crusting issues. And then there's quite a bit of crop that hasn't been planted yet. And so we've got a good opportunity to get in there with the planter with anything that does have a crust that hasn't been planted yet, really break that up and get things planted well. And there isn't, the weather forecast looks awesome. So I don't think there's going to be a big issue with prolonged moisture problems or too much with the compaction or those issues with anything that is yet to be planted anyway, or at least I hope not. I'll cross my fingers.
That's good to hear. That's definitely good to hear. As far as the early season and getting into the start of emergence, have we noted any abnormal movement of weeds in the area, or is that something that you guys are looking for later on in the season?
Well, I've definitely been monitoring the weeds. You know me, David. So we've seen all of our normal, usual suspects out in the field, right? Giant ragweed's always one of the earliest to come up. We've seen common lamb's quarter and velvet leaf. I saw ivy leaf morning glory starting to emerge last week. But most importantly, we started seeing toward the end of April, water hemp coming up. And then right the last day of April, I was able to find our new friend, Asian copperleaf, which is a relatively new species to Iowa, primarily through the kind of north central part of the state. I believe we found it in 8 counties now. And seeing it on April 30th has me a little bit concerned because that's a full 2 weeks before I found it last spring. And if you remember last spring, we came out of winter pretty warm. And so I thought maybe that was an unusual year that we saw it that early last year, but apparently it's not so unusual, and we're finding it even earlier now. So we have yet to see what that'll mean for this growing season, but definitely for anybody who's not been out in their fields yet and got some things planted, if they have yet to put their herbicides on, I might be thinking about my herbicide program and whether or not it's going to control emerged water hemp, because a lot of our early season herbicides are not really targeted toward burn down of emerged water hemp, right? They're targeting a burn down of other species. And so if that's something that somebody is relying on for burn down, they might want to think about whether it'll work on water hemp.
Meaghan, with that copperleaf note, is this a particularly ideal year for it to be growing? What's some of your suspicions on why it might be here so early?
I'm not really sure, right? We've obviously had some warmer than average temperatures. We've had fairly good moisture here this spring. And so I think that probably is helping it along. But I would suspect that more than anything, I'm just getting better at identifying it. So it may just be that I missed it last year when it first started to emerge. And it's a little more familiar to me in those early stages this year. And so it could be that it's not actually emerging that much earlier than it used to be. And I'm just better able to find it. But one of the things that does worry me is one of the fields we found it in last week had 4 different herbicide groups on as a kind of pre and burn down combination. And Asian copperleaf and a little bit of velvet leaf were the only species we found out in that field. So it is making it through some herbicide applications that I at least previously would have expected would do a good job of controlling them. So that's got me on high alert anyway for now.
Any notes on insect populations this early? I know to the east there have been some cutworm concerns, but that wasn't covering Iowa just yet.
Yeah, so Missouri and Illinois both have had some absolutely enormous peak flights of black cutworm, and we have had several peak flights here in Iowa. I think we've had at least 5 of them. And we'll probably be coming out with estimated cutting dates this week, but I would for sure be scouting any emerged corn, looking for those little lines of shot holes through the leaves. That would be maybe an early sign that they were doing some feeding on emerged corn. And then maybe in the next couple weeks, we might expect to start seeing black cutworms large enough to cut corn plants. Of course, the first fields that you might expect to see those in are going to be things that are highly attractive to those moths. So they're looking for good food sources to lay eggs in. And so any fields that would have had a green cover crop here over the last several weeks, any fields that might have had heavy weed cover or patches of weeds, those are going to be the kinds of areas that we might expect to see higher populations of black cutworm in. And it's certainly a possibility because we had some good flights here in Iowa as well.
Meaghan, you talked a lot about weeds and insects and the importance of getting out in your fields looking for those. How important is scouting right now? And if you do find something, what are the best numbers to call?
Absolutely. So, right around when we expect the crop to be emerging, I want to be out checking it and making sure it's doing what I expect of it. We only have really one opportunity to plant a field, and hopefully we don't need that second opportunity to plant the same field. But if we do need to plant it again, or fill in the case of soybean, we want to be out there early to catch that so that we can be prepared to make those decisions. So I would absolutely be out scouting. This time of year is a great time to be doing it. Beautiful weather this week. And if anybody does notice anything that seems off or that they'd like another opinion on, they're welcome to reach out to the Iowa State Extension field agronomists. And they can find us at crops.extension.iastate.edu. We have a people tab right up at the top, and you can reach out to any of the staff across the state, including me.
Meaghan Anderson, ISU Extension agronomist, joining us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
We will continue talking about crop progress as well as the latest Iowa weather in just a moment, but I did want to take a look at the Tuesday market close here for the day. May corn up a cent at $4.47.5. July rising a penny and a quarter at $4.55.5. Soybeans in May down 3 1/4 cents at $10.34 3/4, with July falling 4 1/4 at $10.41. Soybean meal in May $2.60 a ton, in the red at $286.10. May wheat up 4 3/4 cents at $5.19, with July rising 4 3/4 at $5.36. In a livestock market close on Tuesday, June live cattle up 2 cents a hundredweight at $213.67, with August rising 30 cents at $209.37. Feeder cattle in May down 37 cents a hundredweight at $295.70. August rose 30 cents at $299.20. Lean hogs in May down 70 cents a hundredweight at the close, $91.55, with June falling $1.42 at $97.57. That is the Tuesday market close. And joining with us right now, we have state climatologist Justin Glisan here on the Farm Here Daily podcast. We appreciate having you here, Justin. It's been a while since I've talked to you, so let's just talk about this spring planting time. What's been the weather like? What have you noted in particular for 2025?
Yes, good to be with you, David. Yeah, so you look at the last 2 weeks of crop progress reports, and what we've seen are less days suitable for field work. In fact, you look at from the April 21st report, that 7-day period, anywhere across this, we were about 2 inches averaging on the precipitation side, so very wet conditions. We had a few severe weather events in April coming off of a wetter March. Wetter March was good because we were able to infiltrate some soil moisture into those profiles. Coming off of a dry fall, so any moisture that we could get into the ground, the fourth least amount of snowpack on the ground in winter, so not moisture from snowpack. Luckily, we had some snow and rain in March. So what stands out to me over the last progress report that came out yesterday is that corn and beans are right near the 5-year average in terms of planted. So farmers, even with the delays in the field, have really made good progress. And with the forecast for the next 7 to 10 days looking very ideal for rapid planting, I think farmers are going to make great progress in the next report that will be issued next week.
Justin, just taking a look at that crop progress report, I noted that there were some pretty good soil moisture levels going on, especially if you compare it to last year. What can you say about that?
Yeah, particularly north central to northeastern Iowa, where we've had a lot of rainfall. In fact, some stations towards the end of April received a month's worth of rainfall, anywhere from 4 to 6 inches. So we're looking at that. The top line that I look at are the short to very short, just to give us an idea how dry uh, the topsoil and subsoil moisture profiles are. And the smaller those numbers, the bigger the smile on my face, because that tells us that we have a good amount of moisture in the ground. Now, we don't want the surplus number to be too high because we don't want really wet soils. So that adequate number is right in the sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone. And for both topsoil moisture and subsoil moisture, those numbers are looking pretty well, anywhere from the high 50s into the low 80s. So that tells us that both topsoil wise and subsoil wise, we've infiltrated a good amount of moisture. Now, as vegetative demand increases, as the atmospheric demand increases, as we warm up, getting into the growing season, we're going to start to easily extract soil moisture. So we want regular rainfalls that we expect through the growing season to replenish those profiles as corn and beans physiologically mature.
Soil moisture profiles do not necessarily mean a adequate amount in the aquifer. How's the aquifer doing in Iowa?
Yeah, excellent point, David. So coming off of a 4-year drought, 2020 through 2024, finally busted that drought after the ninth wettest start last year, up through this point into June. We busted the drought finally on May 30th. But if you take that 4 years of very dry conditions, deeper aquifers, even shallow well fields need time to recharge. And thinking of those deeper aquifers, it could take 5, 10, 15 years to fully replenish the amount of moisture that was lost from those deeper aquifers, given that longevity drought that we saw, the longest drought since the 1950s. So even looking at moisture profiles, we have to also consider the deeper hydrological components of the system to really give us an idea of if we get into a drier, warmer stretch, which is always possible in summertime, we could see drought conditions reemerge and expand across the state.
I think that's exactly what happened last year as well. We got pretty excited after that May 30th time, and we finally said the drought's over, but then couple months later, that drought monitor was spreading all across the state again.
Absolutely. Second warmest September, driest September on record. If you remember back then, very dry dew points, very dry humidity levels. And we were warming up very nicely during the day. In fact, above average temperatures in those daytime averages. But the overnight lows, given how low the dew points were, they cooled off pretty well, and we were actually unseasonably cool for much of those September nights. So with the dry air mass, warmer temperatures, and lack of precipitation, that's where we saw drought, D0, abnormally dry conditions, and D1 expand across the state. We even had a pocket of D2 around Sioux City. Now, if you look at the drought monitor that was released last Thursday, about 7% of the state is in moderate drought, a little pocket northwest, southwest, and in eastern Iowa, and a big pocket of non or denata or no drought or no abnormal dryness across the central part of the state. Abnormal dryness around the periphery. But where we're standing now is in a much better position than where we were thinking of the drought map last year at this time.
Looking again at some of the weather models, I've been noting that Omega block has been going across the continental United States. What does that mean for Iowa?
Yep. So if you think of the capital Greek letter omega, what is happening is there's a stable high pressure system basically blocking the flow west to east across the United States, and it's centered across the upper Midwest. So what happens is warmer air builds in. You have two mechanisms, southerly flow, bringing in warmer air, but also in those stable high pressure blocks that we are seeing right now, you have descending air from higher in the atmosphere. As that air descends, it gets into a higher pressure regime, compressional heating, and that's where you see warmer temperatures as well. In those stable blocks, and I actually studied these in my master's work, they're very stable phenomenon in the atmosphere, and it takes a lot of energy to erode the stability within that omega block. So when you see that set up, you often get long stretches, several days into weeks of nice weather, but also lack of rainfall. And in May and June, our two wettest months climatologically, when you see 2 weeks of drier conditions possible, uh, it does, raise the red flag in terms of potential drought expansion or intensification. But right now, coming off of wetter conditions in March and a wetter end to April, I think we're in a good position for farmers to really make great progress, as I mentioned earlier. But also looking at the 8 to 14 day outlooks, we are seeing troughing building in across the western half of the United States. And what that tells me is that omega block is going to start to degrade and move further east. And that's where our rain chances improve and increase towards the second half of May.
Let's do a bit of a fun fact time, because when I've heard of the omega block formation, I viewed it as like a block, a grouping, or some such synonym to that. But you just kind of described it as a block, as, in football, blocking another person or another area. When the name and term came into being, do you know which one that was referring to when they called it an omega block?
If you look at the configuration of the jet stream and the large scale flow across the United States, when an omega block sets up, it looks like a capital Greek omega. Think flat at the bottoms and then round around the top. And that's where that high pressure sets up. So with the westerly flow that we see in the mid latitudes in the northern hemisphere, the block itself, you can't go through it. So you have to go over it or around it. And that's kind of where the configuration came into play. There's also what we call a Rex block. There are different types of blocks, but the omega block is most notable when you look at the jet stream configuration and upper level flow. So that's in meteorology, we have lots of different terminology that people are very interested in.
I bet there's a whole bunch of people who that was their first conclusion when they heard it. And so I might be the minority on that one. But the more you know. Thanks for explaining that, friend. Before I let you go, just taking a look at the next couple of weeks here in the state of Iowa, you just mentioned that means it's more likely to be a little warmer, drier. Is that what the models are showing right now?
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at at least the next 7 to 10 days with the stability of this block, we're going to see great weather out there, sunny skies, low chances of precipitation, because we can't see those transient low pressures move through the region. But if you look at the outlooks getting into the second half of May, we are seeing the increased probabilities of wetter conditions building in, with that warm signal still holding on as well. What that could mean is more thunderstorm potential. We're not exactly sure yet, but we're definitely seeing a higher likelihood of shifting back into an active pattern that would bring us rainfall, hopefully after all of our farmers have planted corn and beans.
Our state climatologist, Justin Glisan, joining us from the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. Really appreciate you being here on the Farm Here Daily podcast.
Great to be with you, David. Thank you.
Again, it is thanks to listeners like you we can produce this type of local Iowa content. We would love to have you as part of our community. Please follow this podcast as well as our social media channels at Field Forward. Of course, we have our friends helping make this happen, Iowa Everywhere, as well as Group C. Additionally, you can find me, David Geiger, on social media at Geiger Reports, as well as finding me on TV, WHO TV, Channel 13, every day, their morning and noon hour programs. Again, I'm David Geiger, your host. This is the Farm Here Daily podcast. Until next time, everybody.